Now on to segment 2 of lecture 3. Having located the textual system of theme within the clause as a message within the total grammatical resources of English, let me now warm up towards the introduction of theme and talk about the textual significance of beginnings in general. Beginnings of whole text, of parts of text, and of clauses. We're still located at the intersection of textual and clause. That's where the system of theme is located, its point of origin. Now, beginnings in general have textual significance. They serve as an orientation or a way into something. Into text, into paragraph, into clause, even in fact into nominal groups and verbal groups. But not only that, it may help to think of beginnings in the organization of other systems. Think of beginnings in buildings, meaning the orientation into a building, your starting point when you arrive at a building. If we're doing this face to face, chances are we would be in a lecture room in the Y core. If so, as you approach the Y core, this would be the entrance. And the way in, the way that, let's say, the architect has chosen as the orientation to the building is this. That is the orientation to the building as a resource. You'll find a list of places, you'll find the stairwell, you'll find the lifts, and you can orient yourself if you want to stay on the ground floor or go up to the first floor, third floor, and so on. In other words, the entrance serves as your point of departure for moving through the building. And it's similar if you move through a text, a paragraph, or a clause. The entrance to the clause is like the entrance to a building. It's where you start your journey. As noted above, beginnings are significant on all scales, not just the clause. As far as the whole text is concerned, it has a beginning. So texts are beginnings. These beginnings orient us to the nature of the text. So texts of different kinds, of different types, of different genres have different kinds of beginnings. And these beginnings typically give us a sense of what kind of text it is. For example, the placement of a story or the grab of an advertisement. Similarly, paragraphs have significant beginnings. The paragraphs that make up text have beginnings. And in discussions of composition, traditional rhetoric, they're often called topic sentences. And within paragraphs, messages realized by clauses in the grammar making up paragraphs have beginnings. As I said before, the beginnings of text reveal their type or their genre. So, if you encounter this beginning of a text, high in the mountains lived a daughter of a chief. Her name was Alida, and her tribe was called the Taínos. Probably your reasoning machines, your brains are already processing this, and you're guessing as to what kind of text it is, what kind of context or communication it serves in. Why would you be guessing? Why would you be hypothesizing? Well, because this helps you orient to the text and build up expectations as to how you proceed. Take a second to guess. Yes, a folktale, a traditional story. How about the following beginning? The atmosphere. The Earth holds an ocean of air called the atmosphere. The atmosphere is a mixture of gases that protects living things from the dangerous radiation of sunlight which shows some of the sun's warmth. The atmosphere contains oxygen, which many living things need to live. Take a second or two or three or 14 and a half to guess what kind of text this is. You can do it by exclusion, of course. Is it a folktale? Most likely not. Is it an advertisement? Again, probably not. Is it part of the basic law of Hong Kong? Again, probably not. Is it somebody starting a casual conversation with a friend? No, probably not. Rather, it's a kind of text for learning something about something, specifically the atmosphere. As a kind of text we'll see more examples of, it's generally known as a taxonomic report. It's reporting on some aspect of experience, and it's doing it in terms of building up a taxonomy. Atmosphere, and we'll go on to tell us what the atmosphere consists of. How about the following text beginning? China is one of the world's 4 ancient civilizations. Here we give a concise overview of more than 5,000 years of Chinese history, including the Great Wall and the 4 great inventions of ancient China. Do you know what they are? Okay, you can ponder that, but what I'd like to think about is what kind of text is this? What is the genre? You could argue it's more like the taxonomic report than the folktale, in the sense that it seems to be concerned with building up knowledge for us. However, it may in fact have something in common with the folktale. It seems to be organized around time. What kind of text is it? Well, it is what's generally known as a historic recount. So recounts are like narratives, except that they are factual rather than fictional. So narratives in general, stories like folktales, they're typically imaginary worlds, fictional. How about the following text? China geography. Located in Southeast Asia along the coastline of the Pacific Ocean, China is the world's 3rd largest country after Russia and Canada. With an area of 9.6 million square kilometers and a coastline of 18,000 kilometers, its shape on the map is like a rooster, and so on. What kind of text is this? Where would you think you'd find it? What's its context of use? Well, you might say maybe it comes from the same source as the historic recount. Except, as the title reveals, it's not about time, it's about space. More specifically, geography. And indeed, not surprisingly, is accompanied by a map. Now, there is a hyperlink, so you could look at the map in more detail. It's again a kind of report, but not a temporal report or historic report, but a topographic report. A report about topography. These then are just 4 initial illustrations chosen from the beginnings of texts of different types, different genres. To illustrate what? To illustrate that even right at the beginning, you begin to have a sense of what the text is concerned with. In other words, the beginning serves as an orientation or a starting point for you, in this case as readers, or as listeners if you're listening to me reading them aloud. Let me take an example from a folktale, another folktale, and I want to illustrate this notion of the beginning, and the beginning as a orientation, a starting point for your journey through the text. In other words, a theme, technically speaking. But because it's a big theme of the whole text, we'll call it a macro theme. This is right from the beginning of another folktale, and it starts like this. Pyramids, palaces and temples of stone stand silent and abandoned, hidden by dense rainforests. But that was not always so. Long, long ago, great cities built by the Mayan people were centers of activity. In one of those cities, one whose name has long been forgotten, there lived an old Halak eunuch or chief. Since he had no son to succeed him, he knew that his younger brother, Chiroma, would one day take his place. But the chief's wife wanted a child. Each day she prayed with all her heart. This is what we could regard as the orientation to the whole narrative. It gives us a sense of the setting. It gives us a sense of the time. So the setting is somewhere in the dense rainforest. And the time is long, long ago. And we learn that it's actually about the Mayan people. So a great civilization that disappeared well over 1,000 years ago. In what is now, in present day, Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, and Guatemala. And then it gives us something more. It gives us some information about potential characters, main characters, or at least protagonists, or at least people relevant to the protagonist. Introducing a chief, his wife, and his younger brother. And note it ends here. Each day she prayed with all her heart. So that's setting up a habit, part of the characterization of the characters in the story. The next paragraph starts like this. And one day her prayers were answered. She gave birth to a son. The child was born on the 13th day of the month, a lucky day, for the number reminded the Mayan people of the 13 heavens. Now this comes right after the macro theme, the placement, the orientation. Notice this here, and one day. What do you get at the beginning of the clause? Well, you get a circumstance of time, one day, and it marks a temporal shift. Each day to one specific day. And this is the beginning of a new stage in the story, the initiating event, in fact, the event that will propel the story forward. So notice this transition or this progression from pyramids, palaces, and temples, paragraph 1, to in one of those cities, one whose name has long been forgotten, paragraph 2, and then right at the beginning of paragraph 3, and one day. So there's a gradual move from the macro theme, the theme of the whole text, gives an orientation to the text, to the development based on that macro theme, the first event, the first series of episodes, and one day her prayers were answered. This then gives you a sense, I hope, of the significance of beginnings on different scales. The beginnings of texts, paragraphs within texts, and then messages within these paragraphs. And I've also hinted at the way in which you can think about beginnings or orientations in other structures, like buildings. And at some point, we'll think together about beginnings of films, of movies, for example, how significant they can be, also visually, in terms of how you, as it were, guided into the movie, the film, as a viewer. Next, in segment 3, so lecture 3.3, we will turn to the question of theme selection. So what is chosen, what is given the status of theme in a clause as a message?